I tripled my income by getting a job as a software engineer. And I took practical, easy to follow steps that I think anyone could take. By the end of this video, you'll have hopefully a roadmap to start from scratch and do the exact same thing that I did. Okay, so first, quick story on what led me to want to become a software engineer in the first place, because I think there is a valuable lesson there. So I was introduced to algo trading in 2018 after trading for a couple of years and sort of giving up because it was just too much stress, staring at the computer screen all day, all night. I don't think I got a good night's sleep one time in the first couple of years of trading, and I still at that point wasn't even very consistent. So my cousin calls me up one day and she says that she's using this trading bot she got from somebody, and she wanted my advice because she knew I had traded for a while at that point. I'm like, yeah, whatever, I'll take a look. But I thought bots were a big fat scam. I had lost money on them, I'd used them before. But at that point, I had recently watched this video by a guy named Joseph Nemeth, this video right here. And it started to make me question algorithmic trading and think about it again and think that it might be useful and it might actually work. Anyway, I got on video chat with her and I noticed that there was always a little bit of drawdown on our algorithm, but the balance was constantly increasing and the equity was constantly increasing. And I wanted it. I wanted to have it for myself and to be able to trade it. And at that point, I was broke and I literally spent all my money to drive 6 hours to try to get a copy of this algorithm because the guy that had it wanted to give it to me, but he wanted to meet me in person first for some reason. So I just drove up there. Long story short, I got the algorithm, started trading, and it really only worked sometimes. It would work for weeks at a time. And the entire time I'm watching it trade, and all I could think was what I wished it did differently all the time. Every time it did something, every time I get into a trade or got out of a trade, I would say, I wish it did this. I wish it did that. And it eventually just ended up blowing one of my accounts at the time, as you do as a new trader. At this point, something just clicked. And I immediately started to think, all of a sudden, that trading was just a scam. And this caused me to go into depression because I really believed in trading and I grinded like crazy. And I mean like crazy. Just constantly studying and reading the most dense material I could possibly find. And I wasn't studying like most people do today. I wasn't just on baby pips. I wasn't on YouTube and stuff like that. I was reading textbooks, things like the study guide for the Certified Financial Technician Exam 1 and 2, Wyckoff analysis, Dow theory, stuff like that. And I was still sort of just losing money and I wasn't getting the returns that I saw that YouTubers were getting and claiming that you could get trading Forex. And at this point, I couldn't find any motivation to do literally anything. I was sitting on the couch all day. I was barely eating. I couldn't figure out why everyone was so excited about just being alive. Everyone loved the taste of food and water and drinks, and I just couldn't, it didn't make sense to me in this state of depression, which was really weird. After a few weeks, I started to realize that I was depressed, and I spent a few days really questioning why and questioning what motivated me, what was going to get me out of bed again and make me happy again. And I realized that the hope of one day becoming a successful trader and having that financial freedom and independence is what I really needed in life. Even if I never got there, I realized that having something to work toward that might give me that freedom one day was just enough to keep me going. I realized that I had lost hope in Forex. So I spent weeks thinking about what could give me hope again. And I even wasted some money on one of those built for you Shopify drop shipping stores, if you've ever seen those ads. And that kind of just made everything worse. And then finally, this is when a miracle happened. And this is why I think God is basically calling me to do this, because with the combination of my cousin calling me randomly after having not talked to her for about a year at that point, randomly finding the video from Joseph Nemeth, finally walking in on my brother who I lived with at the time, learning Python, which I had never heard of at that point. He basically said it's an easy language to learn and that entry-level Python jobs paid 6 figures. And at that time, I just hated the idea of a desk job. But at that point, I was thinking to myself, a couple of years making 6 figures really wouldn't be that bad, especially while I figure out what I could find hope in again. So I started to learn Python, similar to what video games look like in the beginning of video games in about the early 80s, before my time. Look up a game like this called Zork. It looks a lot like what my beginner coding looked like. And even though I had quit trading at this point, all I could think about while I was learning how to code was everything I could do with trading and how much different trading would be if I applied what I was learning to trading. And soon I started to think that technology and learning how to code might be able to give me the creative freedom and the financial freedom, or the hope of financial freedom, that I wanted. And soon after that, I was able to lift myself from that depression pretty quickly. I thought to myself at the time, I was on track to make 6 figures, which I could use to invest, and I could use my experience on the job to go and create trading algorithms. So I was basically thinking that I was killing multiple birds with one stone, including lifting myself from depression. And within a year from that moment, I was making 6 figures, and I had used algorithms that I created to get funded several $100,000 to trade. And since then, it's been a long and rewarding journey. So let's talk about exactly the approach I took. By the way, if you're finding any value, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel and leave a thumbs up on this video. Thanks. Okay, first thing I did, I already covered. I basically picked a path I knew I'd be interested in long term. I knew I'd still be interested in algo trading and could still be improving 10 years from that point. And this is very, very important because you will burn out. Let me say that again in case you didn't hear me. You will burn out. Okay, number 2, I studied data structures and algorithms because I basically became aware that this was a huge aspect of software engineering interviews. This is the exact book I used. I downloaded it online and it basically taught me every single thing that I needed to know about coding. I truly think data structures and algorithm books are the best way to learn how to code. Keep in mind, by the way, that coding is a little bit different than software engineering. Okay, next I created my resume and all I put on it was algo trading. I couldn't add any of my bartending experience or sales jobs, and I realized that I had nothing to lose at this point. And I was just starting to learn MQL, which is the language based on C++ that you use to code algorithms in MetaTrader. And I figured that no one that would interview me would really know what I was talking about anyway. And I ended up being right about this. And my resume attracted the attention from a recruiter from Bloomberg, which, if you're unaware, is like the trading technology and data company. And they gave me my first several interviews, which leads me to my next step and my probably biggest step. I applied to jobs way before I was ready. And this is really what set me apart and allowed me to get a job way faster than most people, because most people don't do this. They're afraid of failure, which leads them to just learning and learning and learning and learning and never applying. I made applying to jobs my job at the time, and sometimes I submitted 100 times a day to software jobs on Indeed. Literally anything and everything that I could find software related. And people won't believe me, but failing interviews was the biggest learning experience I've had so far, which is literally the next step that I took. Failed interviews. They basically tell you what you need to know through the questions that they ask. I kept hearing the same questions over and over and over again, and I learned to start Googling what I didn't know after I failed the interview. And then I learned to look up and get familiar with the technology that was listed on the job description. And eventually I found myself getting mostly questions I knew the answers to. And this is when the offers started to come in. I had learned how to talk to people in previous sales jobs, so by the time I learned a little bit of code, I came off as a senior engineer, since engineers typically develop people skills much slower, if at all. So in the long run, being an outsider was extremely helpful. And lastly, all I really did was I kept going. Because I was interested in what I was doing and I wanted to do it for my future, and it gave me hope of a better future, I kept going, I kept applying, I had nothing to lose, and that's what really helped. The more you pound away at something, the better you'll get and the more likely you are to succeed. Okay, so remember a couple of things here. First, you can do much more with technology than just get a job. The jobs are great, don't get me wrong, but you can also tap into your creative side by doing things like making apps, making digital art, video games, or even automating a non-software job. Also, remember that you will pretty much always have imposter syndrome until you just decide that you don't want it anymore. That first check that you get, depending on what you were doing before and how much you were making before, you might feel like you scammed your way into a job and that you're getting paid too much. But don't worry, 90% of people feel this way at first, even if they went to school and got a master's in computer science. At the end of the day, this is a high value skill that can pretty much take you as far as you want it to, either with a job or without a job. But you simply have to start. So that's my story. Let me know in the comments if this helps you in any way. I'd really love to hear some success stories at one point. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.